Story. Yes, there'll be some sunshine, but probably more showers on Saturday, and again some pretty heavy ones, a risk of hail and thunder as well. Nowhere immune, but after a lot of heavy showers on Saturday, it will turn a bit drier and brighter through the long weekend, although never particularly warm.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Coming up today is GCSE Day. Now, I've got to be honest, the thing that jumps out to me is the massive divide between the results in the north versus the results in the south. A little hint, the north didn't really fare very well, but Eton, Eton, the posh boys' school, that is now going to move up north with 3 new colleges. Do you think that? Well, finally, do that mythical levelling up between north and south. Your thoughts? And the UK birth rate is the lowest it's been in 20 years. Many now saying it's time to incentivise people, perhaps with a tax system, to have more children. Is that what we need to be doing? Is that the priority when it comes to tax reform or not? And Prince Andrew, do you reckon that me and you taxpayers should be funding his security. And are you sitting down? Do you know the figure now when it comes to immigration in this country? We have a backlog now, an asylum backlog, 175,000 people waiting to be properly processed. What an absolute joke. And if I've got time for it, I want to talk to you about COVID. Apparently, can you believe it? Apparently, another variant about to hit town massively. Really bored, aren't you? Perhaps, though, you're one of those people that say, no, Michelle, what we need is a return to COVID measures. Give me a break. You tell me why I'm wrong. We'll have it all to come, but before we get into it, here's tonight's headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening. It's 6:01. I'm Ellie Costello in the GB newsroom. Russia's President Putin has sent his condolences to the family of Wagner Group leader who was reportedly killed in a plane crash north of Moscow yesterday. The mercenary boss was one of the 10 people named on the jet's passenger list. Putin described Yevgeny Prigozhin as a talented businessman who he's known since the 90s.
I knew Prigozhin for a very long time, since the early 1990s. He was a man with a complex destiny, and he made serious mistakes in life. He achieved the results he needed, both for himself and when I asked him for the common cause, as in these last months. He was a talented person, a talented businessman. He worked not only in our country and worked with results, but also abroad in Africa in particular.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Navy and military conducted a special operation overnight in Russian-occupied Crimea. Officials say a drone destroyed a Russian long-range anti-aircraft missile system. Yesterday, President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to end Russia's occupation of Crimea. GB News understands the government is looking to block the former NatWest chief executive's multi-million-pound payout. Dame Alison Rose quit after it emerged she talked about Nigel Farage's finances to a journalist. Her actions are being independently investigated. The Treasury says it will decide whether to take action if any wrongdoing is found and if the board doesn't cut her £2.4 million severance package. The backlog of asylum cases has hit a record high. More than 175,000 people were waiting for an initial decision on their application at the end of June. That's up 44% on last year. The Home Office says Europe has seen a similar rise, adding that it's doubled spending on asylum in the last year to nearly £4 billion. A former couple have been jailed for the murder of an electrician in Wigan. Michael Hillier and Rachel Falstow shot Liam Smith in the face and then covered him in acid in November of last year. Hillier was sentenced to at least 33 years in prison. Falstow, who met the victim on a dating app, was jailed for life with a minimum term of 30 years. Detective Inspector Lee Shaw spoke on behalf of the family after sentencing.
Liam was more than just a family member to us. He was our rock, our Liam. He had the biggest and most kind-hearted soul and would literally do anything for anyone. But we are always asking ourselves, why did this happen to Liam? Why do his two boys now have to live with the knowledge that their loving father was taken away from them in the most barbaric of circumstances?
Donald Trump is due to surrender himself on charges of trying to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. These are live pictures outside the Fulton County Jail, where we're expecting him to arrive later. He's facing dozens of criminal charges and will go on trial several times in the next 18 months, even as he campaigns to become president again in the 2024 US election. His former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, surrendered yesterday. The Justice Secretary has ordered an independent public inquiry into the case of a man who was wrongly jailed. Andrew Mulkinson spent 17 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. He had his 2003 conviction overturned by the court in July, following new DNA evidence potentially linking another man to the crime. Patients are being warned of severe delays as NHS consultants in England strike for 2 days. Routine hospital care is expected to come to a standstill, with NHS leaders anticipating major disruption. The British Medical Association also announced medics will go on strike in late September and early October as the union's dispute over pay continues. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says an increase has already been agreed.
We've accepted in full the recommendations of the independent pay review body that looks at the importance of retention, importance of career progression. It means that total earnings for an NHS consultant will be £134,000 a year, with a pay rise this year of 6%. And as I say, that is on top of changing pension taxation, meaning that consultants benefit from one of the most generous pensions in the public sector. So we've accepted in full the recommendations, and I urge the BMA to call an end to the strike, because the strike ultimately damages patients.
The number of students receiving the highest GCSE grades has fallen from last year, but is still higher than before the COVID pandemic. It follows a spike in higher grades in 2020 and 2021, when exams were cancelled because of COVID and results were based on teachers' assessments. Overall, there were over 200,000 fewer top grades this year compared with 2022. And London Zoo is staging its annual weigh-in. Penguins, tigers and gorillas are among the 14,000 animals being measured by zookeepers over the next year. Every mammal, bird, reptile, fish and invertebrate is being monitored. The zoo says keeping records helps to ensure that every creature that it cares for is eating well and growing at the rate it should. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. You can ask for it by saying, play GB News. Now, it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Ellie. And very good, by the way, to see that you got the bright pink memo too. That's what we like to see. Joined up dress coordination. I like it. Anyway, I am Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me, the writer and broadcaster, Connor Tomlinson. And a new face to Dewbs & Co. We like those, don't we? The columnist at the Evening Standard, Emily Sheffield. Welcome, Emily. Nice to have you. You know the drill as well, don't you, on GB News? You can get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. is how you reach me, or you can tweet me at GB News. Now, of course, GCSE Day today. Thank God those days are beyond me. Can you remember getting your results? Were you nervous? How important did you feel that they were? And actually, as you progressed through life, did your GCSEs stand you in good stead, or did they become irrelevant as the years went on, as some have been suggesting recently? Anyway, the thing that I noticed more than anything, perhaps, is the north-south divide, because when you actually look, and I think I can get it up on the screen, when you look at the difference between the attainment, here it is on the screen, you can actually see, when you look, so to the right of my screen as I'm looking at it, you can actually see that when it comes to the better grades, the south performs much, much better than the north. And that is a pattern that's been replicated for quite some years, actually. And I start to think, well, why? What is going on in the north? Why we can't achieve the good grades? Well, our kids can't achieve those good grades. And it caught my eye this week that Eton College, yes, the very posh one indeed, well, they're about to open 3 new selective so-called free schools in the north. And it got me wondering, Connor, I'll start with you. I'm going to speak to Toby Young on this topic as well. Of course, he is very much involved in free schools and academies and all the rest of it. But do you think that Eton moving up north is going to help kind of close that attainment gap that we're seeing on graphs like that and results days today?
So I think the attainment gap, I would be interested to see a breakdown across ethnicities as well. Higher ethnic minority population in London relative to the north. And we do know that some families, particularly Chinese, Asian and the like, have higher education attainment outcomes because of cultural pressures than specifically white working class boys in this country. They're the second to least in education outcomes, just above Irish travellers. So I would be interested to see that demographic breakdown. But on the broader point, I think state schools are generally failing students, not just because there are fewer than in private schools resources dedicated to each student, but because the curriculum is less specified specified to their individual strengths. They often play to the lowest common denominator in the class to make sure everyone's at a baseline level of passing, but they don't enable excellence. And GCSEs as well, they're really poorly structured. You're covering, I think I had something like 30 exams, and boys specifically are often more specified to one specific domain of intelligence, whereas some of their other subjects suffer. So I think we need earlier specification as well in the education system more broadly.
And Emily, let me bring you in, specifically this Eton thing, because I find that I am Northern, my accent gives it away, and I'm really interested in how you can level up the North-South. I don't think you can, actually. I think that ship has sailed, and I don't really think anyone cares, because I think if they did, they would have done something about it years ago before all the gaps got too big. But notwithstanding that, Eton, to use my TV voice and not my whole voice, the 3 new colleges, do you think that will really make a difference in levelling up?
I don't know whether just 3 of them, because there are also only sixth form colleges. And just to explain to the viewers how it's going to work, is Eton is partnering with an academy, Star Academies, so they're actually going to be called Eton Star Academies. But what I think is a fantastic idea, Eton is like a world-famous centre of excellence of learning, but it is only available to those who can afford the fees, although they do a huge amount of bursaries, more than any other private school in the country, and a lot of outreach work. But what this is going to provide up north is all their expertise in how to create, you know, the best learning at sixth form and get those teenagers into Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, Bristol, maybe outwards towards America, because you can get incredible bursaries in America if you're a sporting figure as well. So to me, this is like, it's brilliant, but there are only 3 of them. It's just a start, but Eton is planning on rolling out more. And I also think that it's great between levelling up between the haves and the have-nots, because there are very few people who can afford the school fees for Eton. It is now sort of over £30,000 a year. That's unattainable except for the very richest in society.
I thought it was a lot more than that. I thought it was about 40-odd.
Well, I haven't checked. It probably, with all the extras, it probably is.
Yeah, and then some, yeah. But look, do you know what? If you are sitting there and you're thinking, because I used to be very anti-private schools, I must confess. When I was growing up, I was always saying I'd never put my kid into private schools, never, 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 never. Now that I'm a mum, I sit there and I think, actually, if I could afford to do that for my child, and I knew that I could afford to do it for the duration, because you don't want to be like that kid out the in-betweeners that went and then came out and got bullied. So if you could afford to do it for the duration, would you put your child into private school? I don't really know why anyone would say no to that. But anyway, joining me down the line, we've got the director of the Free Speech Union and a man that knows a thing or two as well about free schools, Toby Young. Toby, good evening to you. Specifically, when it comes to Eton rolling out 3 new facilities up north, do you think that will have an impact when it comes to educational outcomes?
Well, it's very difficult to say with any degree of certainty, Michelle, what educational policies, what educational measures will have an impact. It's an unbelievably complex area, and the research literature is voluminous, and people disagree on both sides, and they often appear to be equally well informed. Eton has been successful with a similar sixth form in East London called the London Academy of Excellence. It's not the only private school involved in the London Academy of Excellence. There are about 5 or 6 that have collaborated, but it is an extraordinarily successful school. I think it gets more kids into Oxford and Cambridge than many leading private schools. And there's no reason to think Eton can't replicate the success of the London Academy of Excellence in these 3 areas where it's opening these new sixth forms. So I think it will have a positive effect, but I don't think we should exaggerate just how positive the effect will be. It's easier to set up high-performing sixth forms, and one of the reasons they do well is because they're very selective. I've been to the London Academy of Excellence on several occasions. You talk to the kids there, they're incredibly highly motivated. They've often found the school themselves. It's not something their teachers or their parents have steered them towards. They've Googled, best sixth form in East London. They found the London Academy of Excellence. They've applied themselves. So you get those sorts of kids applying to these schools. They're probably going to do well, even if they go to relatively poor performing schools, because they're so well motivated, they're so bright. The real problem is in secondary schools. And I think where we can really make an impact there is to learn the lessons of some of the most successful free schools, like the Michaela Community School in Wembley, which got extraordinary GCSE results today. And one of the reasons that school is so successful, apart from the charisma and leadership of Catherine Burbelsing, the head teacher, is because of the systems they put in place. You know, no tolerance for disruption, silent corridors, no talking out of turn in lessons, extremely high expectations of the kid, of all the kids, no tolerance for any bad behavior or breaking of the rules. All the kids are expected to express their gratitude, their thanks to the teachers for the work they do. Just to go to that school, you think to yourself, well, if this system could be replicated in every secondary school in England, we'd soon have the highest performing education system in the world, better than Singapore.
Indeed, interesting stuff. That's Toby Young there, the Free Speech Union director. He mentions Michaela. Anyone that's on social media, if you know of the headmistress there, the headmaster there, Catherine Burbelsing, I mean, the abuse that woman gets, I find it absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, I think she does a great job. But what do you think is motivating Eton to do this? Do you think that they're sitting there from an altruistic perspective going, how do I help these poor Northerners? Or do you think there's something more to it than that?
No, I think they genuinely know they probably can't survive as an institution unless they start helping the less well-off, because it will literally become a school that just caters to the super rich. We're talking about super rich Russians, super rich Chinese. It's times have moved on from when, you know, Boris Johnson was there. Then it wasn't even that difficult to get in. It was more where your family stood, who you knew. I mean, he, in fact, got a scholarship there, so didn't pay a lot of the fees. So I also think they're about to, you know, Labour's already said they're going to change the rules so they won't get charitable status. Now, I could be correct in this. I don't think Eton takes charitable status anyway, so it wouldn't be one of the schools. But I think times have moved on and people want... When you are literally, Eton's one of the most famous education centres in the world. It's got to move with the times, just as Oxford and Cambridge has. But I do think Toby made some very good points. These are highly selective sixth forms. They are great, but they are going to take the best of that area. And I still really believe in that. That is amazing. They're going to be moving kids from these areas into Eton and Cambridge and Oxford and into the top universities where they probably wouldn't have done unless... I know that school in London very well. It is amazing, the one that gets all the children into
she gets
Oxford.
Such a kick in, that headmistress.
Well, she's very outspoken, and as we know in society, a lot of very outspoken women do get attacked.
This is very true.
And she's a woman of colour as well. So I'm afraid I think she knows that comes... I'm not saying it's acceptable, but I think it comes with having a high profile.
I think a lot of parents as well are absolute wet lettuces who can't stand the thought of their children being properly disciplined because they've not managed to discipline their own kids at home. And then when you get them into the school and then they get disciplined in this way, they don't know what to make of it. They can't cope with it. But anyway, I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to private schools because there is, as Emily was just saying then, there's going to be a big conversation that's going to get a lot more kind of focus on it if Labour get in the next election as to whether or not private schools should be granted charitable status, whether or not they should have exemptions, for example, the fees from VAT and all the rest of it. Where do you stand on that, Connor?
I think that it's less so the times are changing and they've got bleeding hearts, and it's more that usually people respond to incentives and not ideas. They are seeing a Labour victory coming down the pike, and they're concerned that if they aren't seen to be engaging in levelling the playing field for as many people across the country as possible, then they'll get the heavy end of the hammer when it comes to legislation. I would say as well, it's less so that I'm sceptical of private schools because I think they have much higher standards. And just for declaration, I went to a state school. It was rubbish, even though it was a grammar school, and they said that they pride themselves on educational attainment. Well, they didn't exactly encourage excellence for most of their students. But I think the standards needs to be raised, and you'd get that a hell of a lot more by making it more market competitive, like the voucher system do in the States.
Well, let me know your thoughts at home. Jerry, you're not backwards in coming forwards. I'm asking why there is a north-south divide, and you're saying it's because Northerners are strong in the arm and thick in the head. Controversial, Jerry. You a Northerner, what do you think to that? Coming up, look, I want to talk to you about, do we need people to be having more children? The UK birth rate is the lowest it's been for 20 years. Does that matter? And if it does, what do we need to do? Do we do tax incentives to get people to have more kids? Would that work or not? You tell me.
Well,
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The writer and broadcaster Connor Tomlinson alongside me, and new face columnist at the Evening Standard, Emily Sheffield. You guys have been getting in touch about whether or not, well, we all know that there is a levelling up issue, isn't there? I personally do not believe that politicians care. I don't care which party, which politicians, because if they did actually really care about the difference between North and the South, the gap would never have become so big. It would have been nipped in the bud a very long time ago. And a lot of people, when you ask people within the political sphere, how do you level up? People just think you get people to London quicker. That's all the HS2 idea. Get people to London quicker and then you will level up. But that significantly misses the point, if you ask me. Richard says again, relocating things away from London would help with the levelling up. Mark says, Eton is an incredibly work school. He puts it in capitals. I know he means business. He's saying he would question whether or not there's hidden agendas. Are they trying to infiltrate the North with workness? I'll leave you guys to figure out that one. Right, the UK birth rate is a 20-year low. Does this matter? I'm going to get straight to the point because we can sit there and get into it all, but the nuts and bolts of it, people are having less kids, the lowest birth rate in about 20 years, and what?
Yes, because if you have no one to be the custodian of your culture, then, frankly, the culture falls apart. And so the easiest way to do that is to transmit that straight from parent to child. And if you look at the data, I've spoken to demographers who have dived into the raw numbers who are far more intelligent than me, and they've said the native population, British birth rate, is 1.4. Whereas the highest number of children for women is from Indian nationals that now live in the UK, and for men, it's from Pakistani nationals that are in the UK. So different cultures are going to be the more dominant one in the years to come. And frankly, I quite like my country and my culture, so I would like to have it continue. And it's also not just the broader civilisational point. As an individual source of meaning, there are plenty of people, particularly all the young men that we've spoken about before, that are feeling depressed, suicidal, that have 27% of them have never had an intimate partner by the time they're 30, unprecedented numbers. Without children, it's going to be a very long and lonely, difficult life for them if they want that. And so there are lots of pressures, both social and economic, that are stopping younger people from having families earlier, and they're miserable.
How do you know they're miserable? They might be really happy. They might be sitting there in their 20s and their 30s thinking, high five to me, I'm a single life.
Why are suicides at the highest ever, particularly among young men? And I'm
no idea,
speaking...
but I suspect it's not because, or all because people don't have kids.
For a very large proportion of them. Why else would you think the incel movement would come out? And I'm not one of these people. I've never had that sort of problem. But definitely for me, and speaking as a 24, 25-year-old man, like, my granddad had kids and a house by now. My dad, kids and a house by now, and they were earning less than I was, you know, both working-class lads. It's been kicked down the can for me and loads of other young men that I talk to. It is difficult. It is quite sad.
I'll come back to you, but Emily, your thoughts?
I think, look, I think he makes lots of interesting and partially valid points, I would say. I think that the low birth rate, the reason we need to worry about it, really, is because the pressures on society are obviously that we're living much longer. And we're going to... That's great. I'm not having a go at people who are above 60, 70 or 80. I hope I live a nice, long, healthy life. But that is going to produce huge pressures on our health service, huge pressures on our tax system and the Treasury to help pay, to keep them going. They're sitting in houses, and we're not building enough new ones for the young. So you've got this very top-heavy population. They're also maybe going to be sitting in jobs. Or, as we know now, there's a whole bunch of over 50s who've retired and stripped out the workforce. So there is a problem in that you need a sort of youth culture at the bottom to encourage, to help, A, look after the old, but also keep the economy going.
So how do we stimulate it then? Because some people are saying about tax incentives.
Well, no, because at the moment what they're doing is we're bringing in, like, high numbers of immigration. So although we're having lower birth rates, which, by the way, mirror a lot of what's going on in Europe, we are bringing in a lot of immigration to fill a lot of jobs that we need to fill. I think a lot of people who move here do assimilate in society. You are right about some of the birth rates in certain, but I do think as you move down, as you're here for longer, I think everyone's moving to that 1.4 to sort of 2 kids. And I think there's two things. I think one is definitely financial pressures. I think women have come into the workplace, and as a working mother myself, trying to juggle, unless you're incredibly wealthy and can have loads of support at home, nannies here, everything, there, you're going to really struggle mentally and physically to be a good parent, and that's the same for fathers. So there is a huge trend in both parents.
Do you think it's good that so many mums are now going into having kids and then going into the world of work?
Of course I do, but I think that we've got much. What we need to move towards more is that men shouldn't feel guilty that they may take some time out of work and look after their children, because lots of men are actually
to come in.
Enjoying it. But I think the other pressures is that I think people, they want a sort of... We've aspired to a different life than, say, your dad and your grandfather did, where people now expect or want to go on 2-3 holidays a year. They want to have a nice car in the driveway. They want to have a big telly, smartphones. I think it's that the priority of what people are spending their money on has changed.
Do you want it to come in?
Yeah, so in terms of the priority of what people are spending their money on, lots of people are getting lots of these goods on credit, so they don't actually really own them. And the reason they're spending their money on lots of that stuff is because, and this made me laugh when Kirsty Allsop ages ago said, well, if you just cut out your gym membership and your Netflix account, you'll have a home immediately. No. Since 1997, when my dad had a house and I was not even a twinkle in his eye, the house prices were 3 times the average income. Now it's 11. So it's just outpaced your earnings so much that lots of people are just going, well, I may as well rent and buy things on the never-never because I'll never actually own my own place anyway. As far as the economy goes...
But on that house one, some people will watch this and say, well, if your dad bought his house whenever, his house now presumably has gone up in value, so he will have equity in his property to be able to release equity and get you on the house ladder if he wanted to.
Well, eventually, but not by the time that I'm able to have kids, really. I mean, what's happening, as you said, with all the money locked up in the property market, is everyone's sort of waiting around for the boomers to die off. And it's like, I don't want that. I've got both sets of my grandparents still alive. I'd rather be able to start my family without having them go extinct, because I'd quite like them to be able to meet their great-grandkids. That would be wonderful. As far as the economy, yes, very valid point, but then we need to restructure the economy, because it shouldn't just be that we have essentially a whole generation of children who are tax cattle to pay for entitlement programmes that we can't quite pay for. And then the other point that I was going to make that's completely gone from my... Childcare, that's a bit perfect. The other issue, if you just say that dads need more paid time off and mums need to be able to get back to work quicker, that increases the ratcheting effect that's made it so that less people have kids, because the reason everything's so expensive is because the state wants everything to register on a GDP graph and everything to have money change hands. So what you need is economic restructure to allow more mums to stay home with their kids when they want to.
Why do you say more mums to stay at home?
Because in the early years of childhood, they're the ones that are biologically equipped to take care of said kids.
But what about dads? Dads can do that.
Dads can't breastfeed.
No, they can't breastfeed, but I'm going to give you a very brief biology lesson here. Women can express and put it in bottles for the dads to feed.
OK, yeah, sure. And I think more dads should spend more time at home, because that's what we did before the Industrial Revolution. But also, the woman has gestated the child. The child knows the voice and the physical contacts of the mum, and so it actually soothes their level of blood cortisol and it helps them bond and develop more. So...
That sounds like an excuse to me, because men don't want to stay at home with their kids. If your wife's pregnant and the man's talking to the child, and we go on the lines that the children can hear, then they're going to know the dad's voice and the mum's voice.
Not nearly as common, because the mum obviously spends more time with them. But it's also like I can speak just from personal experience, and also knowing that I know a guy that's going to have a baby soon. He very much wants to spend time around his wife and his to-be child. But part of the purpose of being a man is to be able to go out and make sacrifices to bring home the ability to care for those dependents, your wife and child. So there's also the meaningful sacrifice that a man can make is to make sure that his wife has a comfortable life.
Well, there you go. Do you agree with that? Are you a man? Do you think that your role in life is to provide for your wife and kids? Are you a woman? Do you believe that actually you want to be dependent on a guy? I don't know. You get in touch and let me know. And also, as well, do we need to give tax incentives to help people have more children? You tell me. I'll tell you what you do want to do with your kids, though. Take them on holiday, don't you? Especially when the weather is as bad as it is in this country. Have a look.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers to come on Friday, and a cooler feel for many, particularly across East Anglia and the southeast, where it's been quite warm and humid today, and we've seen a few thunderstorms as a result. This low pressure sitting across northern Scotland is still providing some heavy showers here, and they'll keep going through the night. Any of those showers still left across the southeast are fading away now, so much of England and Wales will become dry overnight, and it will be a cooler night, certainly than the past couple of nights for many. Temperatures well down into single figures in some rural locations, most towns and cities about 10 or 11 to start Friday. Now, we will start off with a fair bit of sunshine, certainly over the Midlands, South Wales, much of northeast England too. Elsewhere, there'll be more of a mixture of sunshine and showers, and through the day, showers will develop more widely, but I still suspect a good chunk of the day will be dry, particularly for East Anglia and the southeast. The showers fairly well scattered, not particularly heavy, but it will be a fairly wet and increasingly windy day across the far north of Scotland, and everywhere fairly cool for the end of August, high teens for most at best. Saturday is a similar story. Again, yes, some sunshine, but plenty of showers. Showers on Saturday could be fairly heavy, quite slow moving in places, where the risk of thunder as well. Quite blustery across parts of Wales and southwest England. Another cool feeling day. Staying cool all weekend, but after some heavy showers on Saturday, should turn a bit drier for most of us.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
One of my viewers on Twitter says, Connor, thank you for acknowledging the boomers. And I loved the comments on mothers and grandparents as well. Come on, Michelle, give him a break. He's right. Stuff your feminist tropes. That's not all it's cracked up to be either. Well, there you go. What did you make to that conversation about whether or not we all need to be having more kids? And if so, how do you encourage that? Coming up after the break, 175,000 asylum claims are still waiting to be processed. What an absolute joke. How on earth are the government going to clear that backlog?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me the writer and broadcaster Connor Tomlinson and the columnist at the Evening Standard, Emily Sheffield, keeps me company. Lots of you getting in touch about that north-south divide and whether or not Eton moving up north will help matters. One of you just saying, I think it was Susan. Yeah, Susan, what you're saying is basically the wealthy people will just buy a house in that area, but actually it's not going to work like that. It's based on academic selection, so you could live on the back door to it, and I don't think that would help you, quite frankly. Lots of you, in fact, I found this one interesting. Mike, talking about the north-south divide, you saying, I'm a proud northerner, and I think people who live near London or in London have a smug attitude. They think that they are better mentally than northerners and more intelligent, etc. Do you feel like that? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Kathy, you're suspicious, as am I. You're saying that these private schools, they're trying to branch out in these areas because they think that change is afoot when it comes to some of the perks that they perhaps get. But anyway, moving on, 175,000 people. Yes, you did hear me right. That is the number of people that are still waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. Just to give you some context, that is an increase of 44% on last year. I've got to say, Connor, I think this is an absolute joke. I think this is all out of control. I've said multiple times now that this government have lost control. No one even has any answers as to what to do, so I'm hoping that you might have some. How do you fix this?
If they want to hire a lot of people to help process the claims, I'll take £10 an hour to write no on every single one of them. I think lots of British people now who are hard-working, who can see the amount of their areas that have been filled with hotels full of people who will ditch their documents, who get lost in the asylum system based on spurious claims, are just sick of it. We don't want to be spending £8 million a day in taxpayer cash that could go elsewhere or back in our own pockets on people who come from non-war-torn areas. Plenty of people are exploiting the asylum system and the human traffickers that will take them over the channel just so they can sit in a hotel and smoke on my money. So I think, generally speaking, we need to find out the home nations that these people came from, sanction those home nations if they keep letting their people
hang on,
escape.
good luck with that, because a lot of these people took their documents in the channel, so you don't even know where they come from.
Well, we know quite a few. So we know, for example, Albania had a massive influx from last year. We also know that there are quite a lot of North African men who are using social media accounts to invite others to the UK. And that's something that I've reported on my outlet as well. So we know quite a few of these places these people are coming from, and they're not war-torn, and they don't have legitimate asylum claims like people from Afghanistan who are interpreting on behalf of the British Army. So just turn them around, send them home, because you've got no more entitlement to be here than anyone else.
Well, yeah, but the only way you ascertain entitlement is to process them, and this is a flaw in the plan. Do you have any solutions?
Well, I'm afraid, Connor, it's very nice that you've got this view that you'll be paid £10 an hour to go no, but that's not going to help, because that's not processing an application. That's just saying no. The point is we need to process the application. They do. I think it's got to the point where they need to create a sort of task force to deal with this backlog, literally like they did with the vaccine task force, where they need to get a sort of outside of the civil service, bring in specialists who are going to look at the system and go, how the hell are we going to get rid of this backlog? Because the reason why it is costing the state so much money is because, yes, these asylum seekers, whether they are genuine like the Afghans, which I would like to point out were the second highest number coming to this country, 10,000 of them. So let's not all just dismiss them as people trying to jump into the country.
But they're not all our interpreters. They didn't all work with us. There's lots of people that are just coming from Afghanistan because it fell to the Taliban because it's not a good country.
Well, that's understandable, but it is, because if they're allowed to claim refugee status, if they're being tortured for whatever reason, because a lot of people did help the Americans and the British over there, the point being, it doesn't matter what you think, why they're here. There is a process that's meant to deal with it. It's our asylum system. It's the system of processing them that has completely broken down, and they are languishing in hotels for years on the taxpayer's bill, which is causing huge unrest, huge unhappiness, especially when some of these hotels are being used because they're cheap in some of the poorest parts of this country. I do understand why people are getting upset. They're like, well, you're not dumping them in the middle of Chelsea, are you? So I understand people's frustration, but it is the system of processing them which is holding everything up. I also think that our law system, the court system, has got increasingly complex, because you can set a law, but then with each case that maybe finds holes in it, that law then becomes more complex. I'm sorry, it's actually a very complex system. I'm trying to describe it in the most sort of layman terms.
Yeah, but people are cheating the system as well.
Which is, of course they are, but that is why the system needs to be more robust, to find those cheating, to check it, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people talking about how we need to leave the ECHR. I don't think it's because the very way that we deal with law in this country is that every time a case breaks the initial law, that law then becomes more complex and there are more adjuncts to that original law. So it's almost as our system has developed, it has become far more complex, which is why you're getting, like, the aeroplanes not taking off to go to Rwanda, because it's being held up in the courts for perfectly legitimate reasons. But yes, some of them are playing the system. I'm not denying that. But
the reason is
this is not that. I'm sorry, 175,000. That is from what I know, they don't even have enough staff to staff it.
Well, yeah, but how would anyone have enough staff? If you've got 100, if you've got what?
Well, because there's a lot of training that's
day.
got to take place. The job is actually quite complex.
But it seems to be deliberately complicated, because, let's put it this way, even if we left the ECHR, we turn around and join the 1951 UN Refugee Convention that says you're a refugee if you're unable or unwilling to return to your country. So it's just as subjective. So they don't want to fix this problem. They don't want to fix it because all government spending and all the people they can cram into the hotels count on the GDP sheet, so it makes the numbers look slightly better. And they don't want to fix it on the other side because they know that if they incorporate these people into safe and legal routes, because they're financially dependent on the government, they'll have a dependent voter base. So the reason it's increasingly complicated and it's never fixed is because there are perverse incentives for the government not to solve it, while people who have these hotels built in their area are saying, the world on our doorstep is changing, can you fix this for us?
So you actually think that they're deliberately allowing this to get so bad?
Yes, and also the reason is because what do you always hear in the 5 promises? We're going to stop the small boats. Great, please stop the small boats. What about the 1 million+ visas you gave last year? What about the net million migration that we're expecting? What about the 15 to 18 new cities the size of Birmingham we're going to have to build by 2046 to deal with the amount of people coming into the country? It's a distraction technique.
Distraction technique, is it? Do you agree? Well, in fact, who do you agree with? Different opinions on here. Get in touch and let me know. Quick break, and when I come back, I've got a lot to ask you about. Prince Andrew, should he get taxpayer-funded security, yes or no? COVID, are we going to see a new variant? Do we need to go back? I'm going to try and squeeze that in as well, so let me know your thoughts.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with the writer and broadcaster Connor Tomlinson and the columnist at the Evening Standard, Emily Sheffield. I was saying I was going to try and squeeze birth topics in if I can, COVID and Prince Andrew. Emily was asking me why I'm going to be talking about birth topics again. I'm not. That is just my accent. Birth topics is what I was trying to say. Look, we'll get straight into this, shall we? Prince Andrew, of course, he has been marred by lots of controversy. And there's been conversations now about whether or not the taxpayers should be paying for him to have state-backed security. The reason that we've had in this conversation is Priti Patel basically suggested that it might need to be reconsidered, his arrangements, and that email was leaked into the media, which I think is pretty damn disgraceful, actually, because I don't know why people feel it appropriate to leak government business to the media, but that, notwithstanding that, do you think that Prince Andrew should have taxpayer-funded security or not?
No, I don't think he's lived up to the duties afforded to him by his station. And I think no matter what his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein was, it throws his character into disrepute, along with, I suppose, all of the other people that Ghislaine Maxwell was prosecuted for. Oh, no, I forget. She was prosecuted for trafficking people to absolutely no one, of course. But I think that Prince Andrew doesn't deserve any kind of taxpayer-funded security simply because he doesn't represent the interests of the people of this country, and his reputation has such a dark cloud hanging over it. I don't see why he hasn't served us, so shouldn't.
So that's a fat no from you, Emily.
Same fat no, but for also the reason that he has been stripped of all royal duties, so there is absolutely no reason why the taxpayers should be funding him. The palace has been funding him themselves, not the royal family have been funding them out of their own money, because of course they are incredibly wealthy in their own right. I find it quite extraordinary that Priti would have even got into this conversation. I find it utterly extraordinary.
Well, she's had to apologise now, Priti Patel, basically, for any embarrassment that she's caused to the king.
But why even go down there? I mean, I don't know whether she was trying to ingratiate herself with the royal household or something. I have no idea. But that definitely wasn't the topic to try and ingratiate yourself with.
Yeah, it's all very odd. But I just think this whole way that we just accept as the norm now that something's been leaked to the media, I can't get my head around how secure, apparently, government comms get leaked in this way. No one even bats an eyelid. But anyway, COVID, God, I hate that word. Every time I hear that word, COVID, it makes me want to cringe because I just want to go, oh, God, pack it in. But anyway, a new COVID variant apparently has been detected in the UK. It's causing concerns among different scientists. It's all in different countries, basically, and some people are now saying that we need to look at returning to some of the COVID measures, whether it's masks or social distancing or whatever. What do you make to it, Connor?
Absolutely not, because all of the COVID measures were evil, ineffective, and caused immeasurable numbers of harms to children's development, missed cancer diagnoses. When Johns Hopkins University reviewed 19,500 studies, they did a meta-analysis and they found that all the COVID measures only saved 1,700 lives in total in England and Wales, and so those were eclipsed by all of the other harms conducted. Also, if you think that that's just a far-right conspiracy theory, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded a meta-analysis of all of the American states in The Lancet, and they found that the only thing that was supposedly saving lives was the vaccine. Actually, the masks just may have slightly dropped transmission, but had no effect on death rate. So why does it matter if there's a new variant that's far less lethal, barely even detectable, isn't killing anyone? It just seems to me that they just want to impose social control again.
So that's a no from you, Emily.
OK, there was a lot went in there. No, I don't think we need to at this stage. You know, people love bringing up the subject whether we need to put the mask back on again. This variant has not, by the scientists studying it, said that it's got to be nothing like what we first dealt with in the first wave. Most of us are vaccinated now. Most of us have got natural immunisation anyway. They say this variant isn't nearly as strong as the first one. So why would we even sort of think about it? We have to start thinking about COVID as becoming like another flu-based anything that we deal with, a sniffle, a flu. Admittedly, I did test myself the other day because I was feeling a bit rotten. Well, and there is a huge wave of people around me who've had it.
I was just about to say, in this country, 22,241.783 are the number of cases, apparently. In the last 7 days, we've had 57,000 cases. And I was sitting there thinking, who on God's green earth is still testing themselves for COVID? But you've just answered. Why are you testing yourself for COVID?
I just felt like I wanted to know why I was feeling ill.
So you took this COVID test, and did it say you had COVID?
No.
Right. And then if it did say you had COVID, what would you have done?
I don't know, because then I was a bit like, I'm about to go and stay with a whole bunch of people in the countryside, and they've got kids, like with all my sisters and stuff. People are still a bit funny about COVID because they don't want to get ill. A bit like you don't go and stay with people, a house full of people, if you've got really bad flu. Because I had been feeling quite ill for like 10 days. So I think it just comes down to being a bit respectful, that if you're ill and you've got a horrible cold or you have got flu, you don't, you know, you are asked even now in schools or this office, your co-workers don't want you to come in and give them all really nasty flu, say just before Christmas. So I think that's just good manners. It wasn't that I naturally sort of thought, God, they're going to be really freaking out that I've got COVID.
Yeah, I've got to say, I wouldn't test myself for COVID because then, like you say, it puts you in this conundrum then. If you've done this COVID test and you think that COVID is perhaps what people have terrified you into, I don't know, do you still test yourself for COVID? If so, do tell me why. I'm absolutely fascinated. And what would you do What would you do if indeed you found out that you did have COVID? Would it change your behaviour or not? All I would say is never again. Never again, actually, would I ever be forced to behave the way that the country had to on that previous COVID clown world, I would call it, quite frankly. Anyway, Emily, nice to have you. We've enjoyed your company. First-time panellist. Lots of people getting in touch saying that they loved your contribution, that you are very welcome to come back again. So there you go. Connor, a pleasure, as always. And you know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us. It is very much about you guys at home. So thank you for your company, for watching and listening. Do not go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next. I'm off for the bank holiday, yes. So I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good one.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers to come on Friday, and a cooler feel for many, particularly across East Anglia and the southeast, where it's been quite warm and humid today, and we've seen a few thunderstorms as a result. This low pressure sitting across northern Scotland is still providing some heavy showers here, and they'll keep going through the night. Any of those showers still left across the southeast are fading away now, so much of England and Wales will become dry overnight, and it will be a cooler night, certainly than the past couple of nights for many. Temperatures well down into single figures in some rural locations, most towns and cities about 10 or 11 to start Friday. Now we will start off with a fair bit of sunshine, certainly over the Midlands, South Wales, much of northeast England too. Elsewhere, there'll be more of a mixture of sunshine and showers, and through the day, showers will develop more widely, but I still suspect a good chunk of the day will be dry, particularly for East Anglia and the southeast. The showers fairly well scattered, not particularly heavy, but it will be a fairly wet and increasingly windy day across the far north of Scotland, and everywhere fairly cool for the end of August, high teens for most at best. Saturday is a similar story. Again, yes, some sunshine, but plenty of showers. Showers on Saturday could be fairly heavy, quite slow moving in places, with the risk of thunder as well. Quite blustery across parts of Wales and southwest England. Another cool feeling day. Staying cool all weekend, but after some heavy showers on Saturday, should turn a bit drier for most of us.
The